Good morning, everyone. It's great that you can join our webinar today, Ask the Panel's Family and Relationship Issues webinar. My name is Amrit Sahota, and I'm a financial planner at Tilney. Our panel today from Mackerel Solicitors are Alison Green, Head of Family and Relationship Team, Manisha Hurchin, Associate Solicitor, and Jim Richards, a Senior Associate Solicitor at Mackerel. Today, I will be hosting our panel alongside Chris Lane from Mackerels, who I shall now pass it over to introduce the rest of the panel.
Okay, thanks, Amrit. My name's Chris. I head up the business development team at Mackerel Solicitors, and the other side of our panel today consists of Zoe Bailey, a Chartered Financial Planner Director from Tilney Financial Planning. We have Bruno Welch, an MD and mortgage consultant at Clayton Welch Associates, and Tom Nash, a certified life and business coach at Melia Mines. So we're going to go straight into the questions. And if I can start with you, Bruno, I'm currently going through a divorce. Do I need to inform my mortgage lender?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's a good question. I would, in a nutshell, yes is the answer, because it's all about communication. Communicating with your lender is vitally important. A lot of people seem to have this misconception that you shouldn't say anything to the lender, only go to the lender when there's a big problem or an issue arises. I would counter that to say that that isn't the right advice. I would say talk to the lender, or if you don't feel maybe comfortable talking to your lender initially, come and speak to someone like myself who's an independent advisor, and we can give you advice and guidance around your current situation and how to communicate effectively with the lender subject to that situation. So I would say yes, always come and speak to someone like myself, and we can give you advice around that side of things. So,
excellent. The question that's just come in, been emailed to me. It's for the family team. So, Jim, would you like to pick up this question? It's I'm married and have just split from my partner. The house is in joint names. What can I do to get my share?
Okay, so the first thing to say is that someone who's not married to their partner, former partner, is in a profoundly different situation to someone who's married. So the things that people may have heard in relation to divorce and how that's dealt with are completely and utterly inapplicable. So it's important to focus on the actual specifics of the situation rather than what you may have heard from a friend of yours. I was going to say in the pub, but we don't go to pubs anymore, do we? On the socials, if I can put it like that. So it's dealt with essentially by very strict legal principles. So whereas with a divorce, there's a discretionary exercise which involves taking into account a whole raft of things. If you're unmarried, then it's more or less what you agreed, what the documents say, what the intention of the parties was, and so forth. So if something's jointly owned, then it's quite clear what's going to happen. You'll be entitled to sell the property and receive your half share. There may be other ancillary arguments about this or that. One person may say, well, yeah, we agreed that I'd get the money back that my parents gave me, only that's not reflected in anything, or I did all this work and I want my share back, and so on and so forth. But in terms of how you actually get the money in your bank account, that really is it's more than $64,000 now, isn't it? The question. And what I say is this: don't necessarily go into this wanting to declare war on your former partner just because they're your former partner. The best thing is always to do the simplest thing, which is to talk to them and see if you can agree what to do, because it may be that the other person wants to stay in the property, and if that's the case, then they may want to buy out your share, and obviously you don't know that until you talk to them. So equally, if you wanted to talk to me, I'd want to know that kind of information too. And then we're getting into things like how much is the house worth, what's their share worth, and what's your share worth, and how do we pay for that. So we're thinking about the kind of thing that Bruno can help with: refinancing, mortgage capacity, affordability, all of those things. So there's a whole gamut of questions that need to be answered before you can even reach a point about how you go about doing something. But I would say more jaw than war at the outset anyway. If it becomes clear, having tried your very best to discuss what should happen with the other person, and they stalwartly refuse to do so, then yes, you may have to consider other options. So what might those options be? Well, I think the first option, again, I'd consider is mediation. And mediation is a very useful tool, and one I very much respect and see the purpose of within family proceedings. And in the appropriate case, it can be very helpful to parties to enable them to resolve these kind of disputes. Equally, however, the dynamic between parties may not be quite right. It may not be appropriate. It's one option of several which people can use. So if it goes well, talk. If it goes slightly less well, but you're still getting along, mediate. And if none of those work, come and see someone like me, and we can then deal with this in a slightly different way. We can assist you in perhaps exploring those options at the outset if you want an overview about what you're entitled to, what your rights are. And then if it doesn't actually work out, then ultimately what we can do is take this matter to court. Now, I wouldn't suggest that as being the first step that should be undertaken, but it may be the final step. And the advantage of going to court is it sets a timetable which must be adhered to. I can answer any specific questions about the legislation and the procedure afterwards, if anyone wants that, or we've done webinars on this before and people can have a look at those. But ultimately, a court will set a timetable which will resolve this dispute, albeit in a way which is expensive and stressful. But that is an option if the others fail.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that, Jim.
Jim, finance is the next question. So over to you, please, Zoe. How can I improve my financial security this year?
Yeah, I mean, this year is such an odd year. It seems to have absolutely flown by, and we've sort of sniffed it, just disappeared into sort of booking into meetings into 2021. But I think when we look back at it, and actually if we look at this year as a rolling calendar year, so what can I do now to protect myself should next year be like this year? Three main takeaways I want to sort of give you all today. One, emergency cash is the key. Now, this is whether you are employed, self-employed, run your own business. Emergency cash is the first port of call, and don't really get bogged down with interest rates and what it's going to grow by, because it's not there for that reason. It's not there for growth. It's there for liquidity, and you need it should the roof fall in, boiler break, get sick, get coronavirus, be made redundant, all of these scenarios that have happened. And the first step for that is looking at your expenditure. As much as you might not want to, get a pen and paper, sit down, try and work it out, whether it's monthly, yearly, weekly. And once you've worked out your basic expenditure, that's how you know what you need in emergency cash. So I'd say for most people to have sort of 3 months to 6 months of emergency cash sitting there. So 3 months to 6 months of your basic expenditure as emergency cash. And obviously some people might have a personal preference to want more, but I would say that should be a minimum. If you're self-employed, maybe set that bar a bit higher so you feel that peace of mind. Secondly, protection. I mean, the furlough scheme is the largest group income protection scheme that's been sort of created in the UK. Now, that's been a huge safety net for a lot of people this year. What happens when that's disappeared? You do need your own safety net. Get educated, see if your company has a group income protection scheme that you're part of already. If not, or even if they do, because again, job security is not a sort of something we can rely on completely, especially in these current times, then get some quotes. Talk to an advisor, Google online, talk to friends and family or colleagues that might have an advisor. You can get some quotes off someone they trust. Have a look at what it costs. It's not a lot, and it can protect up to 60% of your salary paid tax-free, which for most people is their net salary. So that gives you real peace of mind. Thirdly, start saving. Even this year, when people feel like they're on furlough, they're on under the cosh, maybe getting 80% or less of their income, or for those who are still working like all of us, like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, you will find some savings this year. There will be petrol savings, that coffee savings, that lunch. So just start saving if you haven't already. And that could be £20 a month, £50 a month, £100 a month, whatever it is within your comfort zone.
do it at the beginning of the month and start to see it build, and that will really build your financial security.
Lovely. Thanks, Zoe. What have we got next, Amrit?
So the next question is for Tom. And perhaps this is how many people are feeling, especially in 2020. And a question's come in, and it's, I'm struggling to manage my emotions. How can I deal with this?
No, this comes up all the time, particularly if you're going through divorce or separation. And it depends obviously on a lot about what those emotions are, because for everybody, our situation or experience of the situation of divorce or separation resonates with us differently. So for some people that might be angers, sadnesses, fears. One that comes up quite a lot particularly is guilt and shame and things like that, and resentment. So it's also about kind of the emotions that you're going through, and there's various different ways that we can approach that through coaching. Some things that you can start to do yourself, actually, in the first instance, is actually just acknowledging and being aware of what your emotions are. Not necessarily always the negative ones, because you are going to be on this roller coaster constantly up and down, and they can change very quickly to if your phone pings and you see their name on an email popping up, and it can send you into that anxious moment and send you into a situation of fear, maybe. So there's a whole host of things you can do, but initially the first step is kind of awareness and acknowledgement of your emotions, but like I say, not just the negative ones. So starting to recognize those times when actually they're not present, so actually that you're feeling more confident, you're feeling happier. That might be when you're taking the kids to school and things like that. So the first steps around acknowledging them is really understanding what they are and how they mean to you as well. Reminding yourself as well that they are just thoughts, they're just a moment in time and they pass. Whilst it doesn't feel like it at the time, they will at times will change, and you can work through these. One of the bigger things is actually starting to recognize your triggers as well. So if you can break this into kind of like a strategy or like a business plan type thing, if you like, where you can recognize those triggers. So for example, let's use the phone pinging and your ex's name popping up, or even still their solicitor's name popping up in your email. If you can use certain bits of your tech, if it's relatable, to shift that so it doesn't kind of, you get the notifications so it doesn't send you into that moment, but you check your email once a day at the time when you're feeling prepared for it, that can help start to lessen those as well. So it's looking at your triggers and then how you can manage and cope with those. The other thing, linking back to awareness as well, is really starting to recognize what it means to you and getting it out of your head. So you actually start to really understand what that emotion is. And some simple things around that is journaling as well. Not necessarily Dear Diary, it can just be a list of what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And then linking that with things like a gratitude diary, which is always helpful as well in terms of starting to recognize the positives that are out there in the world, to start rebuilding your confidence and self-esteem, to putting you in a better place, thus helping your mindset. And the last tip, I'm not a physical coach or any means, however, it's clearly obvious that your mind and body are connected. So you've also got to look at, what are you doing to look after you? Are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Are you exercising? Are you spending time with positive influences as opposed to seeking advice or input, or even a shoulder to cry on from someone that's maybe a negative influence, that is actually all they're doing is amplifying those negative thoughts for you, not necessarily helping you look for a solution in those kind of circumstances.
Good tips there, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I mean, definitely there's a lot of clients, sadly, especially the female side of sort of going through a separation, that happens a lot. There's a lot of bullying, trying to push them into like the wrong financial settlement, or, you know, it's sort of a really tough situation for both sides, I'm sure. Yeah, they definitely need someone like you. Having your contacts now is going to be great for them.
Some of those points are really interesting, though. I mean, we're very cautious about sending people correspondence on a Friday afternoon if it's going to worry them over the weekend. We also note clients' birthdays and things like that, so that, again, we're not sending them bad news on a day which should be special for them. So I think as advisors, we can tap into some of those things and try and do the best for people.
Yeah, that's a good point that you mentioned, actually, about not sending a message on a Friday night, because obviously conversely, the other side, if they're a collaborative lawyer and they're coming at a very different angle, may purposely send them at 5 o'clock on a Friday night.
That's absolutely right. That does happen quite frequently, actually.
Exactly. So if you can switch off those notifications, or I mean that's just one example, but it's just recognizing all of those triggers that can send you into a bit of a spin and that create a reaction rather than response as well. That can really help you. We can do various other things around timeline therapy and neurolinguistic programming techniques to increase your confidences, keep you calm with your logical reasoning and thought part of the brain, rather than the amygdala, where your fear and anxieties get triggered from. So that if you're building this strategy, like I say, where it's I don't know, on a Saturday afternoon at 12 o'clock when I'm walking in the park is a good time for me to check my email, then fine, let's do it then. But you're also then in a more congruent thought process and space to manage and deal with that in a reasonable manner.
Actually, yeah, you could flip that round, couldn't you? And if you get bad news on a Friday evening, although you're thinking, I can't action this until Monday, that's probably quite a good thing for your monkey brain not to kick in, as it were. Have time to process it and actually sort of coach them through that and allow them to sort of process it over the weekend. Talk to their coach or their solicitor on Monday and actually respond. And you could get so much more. We should turn it around. Friday evening ones are good. You actually have the whole weekend to process and have to really good, be on the front foot for Monday.
And what you've done there, actually, Zoe, is another tool called reframing.
There you go.
Looking at the flip side of the coin. So
Yeah.
I've had clients before when they're talking about maybe their children, their teenagers, and they'll say, oh, he or she doesn't listen, they do it their own way, and they never tidy their room, and I can't get through to them, and they're bone idle. Okay, they might be. But also, as a 14, 15-year-old growing up in an Instagram world, actually them being very strong-minded, focused on what they want, knowing their own mind, that they won't be swayed, will help them in their careers. So reframing and just looking at things from a different angle can also help you shift that.
Yeah, really true.
Great. On to the next question, which is, where are we? Mortgages on this one. We have to sell the marital home and have a joint mortgage. What are my options around getting another mortgage when I'm the main earner? Sorry, not the main earner.
Okay. Yeah, so as with mortgages, it's all about affordability based on income or taxable income that's earned. So if you want to get another mortgage, it's going to be assessed based on your individual circumstances and financial standing, ultimately. So it's a combination of what you earn as an income, whether you're employed or self-employed, but also taking into account any other background secured or unsecured debts that you may have in place as well, because that all affects the affordability calculation that's and the mortgage ultimately that's available to you. So, I mean, if the marital home is being sold, then usually there is an element of equity split to come out to each party. And then if that party is then talking to ourselves, we can then look to assess based on those figures as to what the capability or ability to raise a mortgage is based on that information as such. So ultimately, everyone's situation is unique. So it's always good to come and speak to an independent advisor, and they can advise and assist as to what the best options are around your individual circumstances ultimately at the end of the day.
Excellent stuff. Okay, thanks for that. Just a reminder to the audience, we've got questions coming in from all different angles, but if you would like to ask a question as we go along, the Q&A facility is available probably at the bottom of your screen. Do type your question into there. Hopefully we'll get around to it in the presentation itself, but if not, we'll get in touch with you after the event. Amrit, over to you.
Another question for the family team, and it's someone who's thinking of purchasing a property, buying a home with their partner, and they earn more than their partner, and their parents will also be helping contribute to the deposit and helping them out financially. What particular things do they need to be aware of and need to discuss before they make this transaction? Alison, do you want to take this one?
Okay, well, I think it really depends on whether they're planning to marry or not. We would say, whatever the situation, you need to think what the contributions are going to be. So if the parties are putting in unequal contributions, we would ordinarily suggest that actually you have a declaration of trust. Yeah. If the parents are putting in some money for one of the parties, then again, there might be other documentation that you should put in place to help protect the parents' interests. I know actually if you're buying with a mortgage, that might become quite complicated. I don't know, Bruno, whether your mortgage companies have issues with that, because quite often you want to show the money has come from the parents and needs to be protected. But some mortgage companies are not very comfortable with that sort of documentation being in place.
It depends on the mortgage lender ultimately. Again, individual circumstances drive which lender we end up sort of advising or recommending on. But there are various ways and means of either gifting deposits or arranging certain setups like joint borrower, sole proprietor. Yeah, different lenders offer different assistance scenarios as such, for want of a better expression. So really it's down to what the position of the parent or the immediate family member giving the gift or the assistance funds as to what the most applicable setup is and who the lender will be ultimately at the end of the day.
I think it really very much depends on what people want to achieve, because clearly what you're actually looking at is what happens in the worst case scenario if the relationship breaks down. That's what really you're touching on. If you're unmarried, to a degree, the documents can be much clearer. You can have a declaration of trust to show their respective contributions. You can have a cohabitation agreement, so it can all be documented. And providing that's all done properly, everybody takes independent legal advice, etc., then if the relationship did break down, those documents are absolutely crucial, and that should help with the outcome. The more complex situation is if you're married. Yes, of course, you can still have a declaration of trust, but if that property is then your marital home, when you divorce, the court can override those documents, because the family legislation allows a court to say, well, that's maybe what you agreed in the first instance, but this was the family home. We need to separate the assets based on the parties' needs, and therefore we're going to override that documentation. So it's a bit of a minefield. It very much depends on what the situation is, what your circumstances are, what you're trying to achieve, and what the outcome might be. You can have prenups as well. So again, you know, that's something else which may reinforce the situation. But I would say in that situation, come and chat to someone. Let's go through the detail. We offer a free initial consultation. So let's have that conversation, and then, you know, we can go from there.
Yeah, that's really helpful, because perhaps when a couple are initially buying properties together, they may have not covered the marriage subject. And it's good to know that as their relationship evolves, that they can have the right support and get the right documents and things in place should things go wrong in the future.
Yeah, and it's not cast in stone. As people's needs change, and if the nature of their relationship changes, then obviously you can change the documentation and override what you did at the start. So, but absolutely come and have a chat.
Yeah.
So just from a financing point of view as well, the way the mortgage lenders will always look at it is that each party is jointly and severally liable for the mortgage payment. So regardless of technically what agreements are there in the background from a legal aspect, and you're quite right to have those agreements in place, whether it's a couple looking to get married or friends buying together, whatever the situation is, it's always, especially when the deposit amounts going in are disproportionate. But from a lender's point of view, from a financing point of view, both parties are, I could say, jointly and severally liable for those mortgage payments. So it's just to always be aware of that as well, because that's quite an important point.
I've had some clients that use tenants in common and obviously get a bit clever with the percentages and try and work it out over the length of the time of the mortgage and what it might then be to take into account the different deposits at the beginning. How is that affected in the sort of legal space of the tenants in common?
Well, I mean, that's what you would reflect in the declaration of trust. You would hold it as tenants in common and reflect the unequal percentages. Yeah. And as I say, if you're unmarried, that works. If you're married, and certainly once you've been married for a number of years, if the marriage then breaks down, the court may not take that into consideration. It has the discretion to override all of that to ensure that everybody's needs are met, particularly where there are children involved. So
I had a situation where a flat with a married couple who I was acting for the wife, and the property was in her sole name, but essentially it had been bought, vast majority of it, with funds from the husband, and the conveyancing solicitors had got him to sign documentation which said that this money was a gift. And so we were realistic about the argument in terms of, well, you said it was a gift, therefore it must be a gift. But ultimately, within the divorce context and within the financial remedy application, we had to take a more pragmatic view, because even if it had been a gift, and the fact that it was in her sole name, they were married, and therefore the court has the power to just basically ignore all of that and do what it likes. And I think between spouses, that's one thing. Where it becomes much more complicated and much more, I think, ultimately unsatisfactory is when you're having parents who may contribute a very substantial amount to a purchase, and you have a situation in which maybe after not very long sometimes, a marriage comes to an end. That's when it can get really messy, and that's what you really do need advice on. And I think it's a real situation where you need to speak to a number of people. It's not good enough just to say, well, I spoke to a lawyer, therefore I'm good to go. You need to speak to people like me, Alison, Bruno, because collectively we can put forward something which works to enable a purchase to be effective, because otherwise it's academic. You have to get the purchase done, but at the same time, you have to have the documentation done in such a way that it's most advantageous to you.
Yeah. I think also, just to touch on the other point, the parental point, in circumstances where the relationship breaks down, particularly if they're married, parents can intervene in the divorce proceedings to try and recover the amount that they've invested. Now, clearly, if there's documentation to show that they did invest that sum, that's very helpful. If there isn't, it's a bit more challenging. So, quite often courts say, well, it might have been a soft loan, it wasn't intended to be repaid. But they can intervene in the divorce proceedings to try and recover the money they've put in. And that's becoming more and more common with the sort of bank of mum and dad scenario.
Yeah, especially now with people trying to get on the property ladder, and parents trying to gift the funds.
Well, I think also some people, the liberalisation in pensions enables parents to help out their children in ways which they couldn't previously. It's more that there's more of a coherent financial context. But the law of unintended consequences, you draw down something from your pension, you give it to number one son or daughter, they then split up and boom, it goes up in smoke because some smart Alex says it was a soft loan. What on earth's a soft loan when we're at home? It's not really a loan, is it? It's a gift. So really, to protect everyone, clarity is the answer, and that's why at the outset, not, oh holy moly, I think she's going to bin me. At the outset, when the purchase is contemplated, get this information, get this documentation, get this advice, or don't, and then cross your fingers.
Yeah, no, really helpful, thank you.
Big question coming at Zoe. We are thinking about starting a family. What advice can you give for us to best prepare financially for this?
Actually, a question that's come up quite a lot this year. I think this year statistically is going to be the largest school year on record. But yeah, I just want to give 3 top tips on this again, because it is something that we think about, especially for someone who's self-employed. So first of all, research, get yourself educated. If you are employed, what does your work offer you and for how long? Look at what the government offers you as well, and have a look at whether your company offers something called shared parental leave. It's a really interesting new kind of Scandinavian theory, and it is coming into a lot of maybe previously US owned firms or large UK firms, and that's where you and your spouse can share that time off and actually share the maternity pay. So do think about that. If you want to get back to work sooner but you want to have more family care for the kids, then that's something that's new and can be hidden somewhere in your sort of employee handbook. So have a look at that. So the second thing is basic expenditure. Again, get that pen and paper out, look at your expenditure, not the sort of discretionary holidays as much as we love to do them, and all the sort of dinners out and what have you. Really look at the bottom line. What puts food on the plate? What keeps the roof over our head? What do I really need for that time I want to take off with the kid? And especially for self-employed, really look at that basic expenditure. And then times that simply, when you work out the monthly, take into account unknowns like cars having to go in for services and things like that, but times that by the time you want to take off, whether that's 3, 6, 12 months. And really crucially, this is something that I know may sound really stupid, but it's not done in practice, and it causes a huge financial discrepancy in male and females. When you are saving for that, obviously, if you're having a child with a partner, it is for both of you to save for that maternity leave. It's not just for the female to save for that time off. Yes, she's the one losing the income, but she's also the one who's got to make this human. So it's both of you. It's an expense for both of you. So, and actually working as a team towards that, working as a team on working out your expenditure, working as a team on how much time financially one of you can afford to have time off, or both of you at different times, then work together each month to save towards that. And you'll feel far more united as well when it comes to actually having that time off. You feel like both parties have supported each other. And thirdly, save when you get paid. And it's something I'll reiterate over and over again, but as soon as you get paid, do the savings then. And it feels like a sunk cost, and you'll be surprised how much you just manage to get through that month, even if you're missing out on £200.
Excellent. Okay, thanks for that, Zoe. Amber, over to you.
So this is a question about children for Tom, and it's about communication that's come in, and this is quite interesting, and it's about my ex and I always argue and can't communicate even about children. So Zoe was talking about sort of setting up a family. What can we do? How can we better communicate?
Yeah, okay. This obviously again comes up a lot. A lot of the time, actually, what also comes up within that question, it sounds like it's been asked, is also around what can this person control? Because obviously they're trying to communicate and they're feeling the other party isn't engaging. A lot of that time it's going back to what you're both feeling. So going back to the last question around the emotions, about what each of you are both coming at from the different angles. So then it's really understanding not necessarily what you're projecting, but how what you're saying is received. So within our communication, all too often, in particular a situation like divorce or separation, and especially where children are involved as well, all too often it goes back to that reaction rather than response. So a lot of the time where people are, I suppose, keyboard warriors, where they get that email come through and it's just rah, and they unload and tap away, and that's not helping. That's not communication. That's just extending the argument. So I will advise with clients that take that time. So if it is a Friday at 5 o'clock, like Zoe was saying, and we go for a walk on the park on Saturday and deal with it, taking that time to really divulge the information when you're trying to communicate back and forth, directly or through your other mediums as well. That's another point as well. Sometimes if you can't initially communicate directly as well, looking for a positive medium for both of you. That might be through parents, siblings, joint friends, maybe your solicitors that are collaborative solicitors. Even using, again, I'm not kind of pushing other people's tech, but I know there's a platform out there called Our Family Wizard, which is an amazing tool for both parents to be able to use, because it timestamps and documents and everything, but it also helps both of you assist in the way that you comes to communication. So it'll give you like autocorrect advice around, that doesn't sound very nice, maybe you could reword it.
Oh, okay.
So the other thing with your communication as well is making sure, and again, this is about the bit that you can control. So with coaching, it's not just a shoulder to cry on, they're there, help you feel better. It's also about what can you go in action, what you're responsible for. So with your communication, are you communicating from a place of ego or empathy? Regardless of how the relationship broke down and who's pointing the fingers and where the blame game's at, essentially, if you want the communication to improve, something has to give. Someone has to break the cycle and break the chain. And that can be as simple as offering a cup of tea, right, and inviting them in, especially if you've got children involved. You then start to think about the lessons you want to teach your children, about how they are going to communicate with their friends, with their teachers, in their classroom, in their playground, as they grow older, and relationships that they take. Do you want them to be coming from a place of ego or empathy? Is it a reaction or is it a response? So again, this isn't necessarily around how can I get my partner or my ex-partner to change what they're doing. Well, what can you control? Mm-hmm. Also, it's also about how you ask those questions as well and how you approach them. So think about your communication. I think I've said this in a previous webinar we did before, but only 7% or roughly 7% of your communication is the words you use, is verbal. The remainder is your non-verbal. So that's body language, eye patterns, micro expressions, even as simple as when your kid mentions the other parent, you're not projecting the right way. So there's tonality, intuition, all those sorts of things. So approaching the situation the right way, as well as with the words. So also looking at how you get solutions based. So it's also about engagement and involvement for the other party. Using the example where it's parents talking around their children, it might be schooling, pickups, who's got them at Christmas, things like that. So it's also about getting involvement and engagement. We were saying earlier, Zoe, about where one partner or the other kind of puts the blame on or the pressure on or takes it. So it is about involvement. If you're doing this, if you've got children, you have to be to co-parent correctly. It is about communication. So then it's looking at how are you working together. So even if you have to look at it again like a business context, I'm sure all of us, probably not everyone at Mackerel's, but I'm sure everyone in their jobs at some point or in their previous working life has worked with someone they didn't particularly like or wouldn't spend time with outside of work. But if you're working towards a common goal and this particular project or timeline, you find a way to work together. So that then becomes solution based. So then it's not projection and blame and putting the responsibility onto the other person. Well, when are you going to do that? Like, why are you doing that? Why aren't you doing it this way? Why weren't you there to pick up little Tim? Then it's more around solutions-based questions. So more, okay, so how could we approach this together? What can I do that's going to assist you? Because if you can't be there for 5 o'clock to pick up little Timmy from football, what can I do to help you and assist you that actually creates a better environment for little Timmy? Not you, I don't care about you. What I'm focused on is my son.
Yeah.
Little things like that. So less why questions, more how, when, where, what, even who can help us with this? What resources do we need? How can we approach this differently? What are your thoughts on X, Y, and Z? Because communication is two-way. So you need to be able to bridge that gap. And that bridge isn't just you driving across one side saying, do this, do that, do the other. You've got to meet in the middle and work together. So yeah, there's a whole host of things that we can work on.
Yeah, and not living up to your ex-spouse's thoughts of you. Like we were talking about this earlier about if say for example you've got one party and the other party and one party stereotypically, let's say, has an affair, they want to go through this process thinking they're not the baddie. That's just a human resilience thing, that they want to protect their own sort of personality, so that their natural thing is to make the other person the enemy. Well, I did it because this person was like this to me, or this person was like that to me. And throughout the process, throughout the divorce, we always see it. That person who technically was the innocent party gets really character bashed and sort of character destruction. And I mean, sort of, what do you do? I mean, it comes up a lot with my clients, and we financially coach them to understand, you know, what they're asking for isn't unreasonable, and actually it's a good settlement, and they're not, you know, they're character bashing you just to try and force you into a bad settlement. But how do you help them, Tom, sort of process that sort of character destruction and understand that that's not them and there is light at the end of the tunnel?
I think it's a really good point, and it comes back to what we were talking earlier about shifting perceptions. So when you said about, like, when you reframed early, that's a way of shifting perceptions and things like that. So a lot of the time I've had clients come to me and have their free consultation call with me, and then at the end of it said, oh, you've been a little bit direct. Well, actually, my style and the way that I approach things is to be direct, to help people make those changes they need to. So in that respect, it's also helping people change that perspective. I'll say to people, look, if you've managed to get maybe the baseline foundations of co-parenting, but you're still struggling in that respect, okay, and we'll start painting a picture, and depending on their learning mechanisms, which I'll learn through their sessions, so if they're visual, if they're auditory, if they're kinesthetic, so more emotion and feeling, I'll use my language patterns with them to ask the questions in the way that resonate with them. And we might challenge certain situations to say, so you've thought about the foundational levels of co-parenting, and you're kind of getting there, but there's still these certain issues and there's still some blame gaming. Okay, start painting the picture. So how many kids have you got? I've got 3. Okay, so they're 10, 12 and 15. So at some point in the next 10 to 15 years, at some point, give or take, it's likely, potentially, that your 3 children will have 3 children, will have children. Let's all say they have 3 kids. So now you've got 9 grandchildren. Forget co-parenting. How do you want to grandparent? How do you want to deal with 9 first birthdays? How, not just for you or your ex, how do you want that to be not just even for your children? How do you want that to be for your grandchildren and their cousins? And what do you want this environment to look, sound and feel like? Nobody wants it to be horrible. It's stressful, it's draining, it impacts our work, it impacts our new relationships, our existing relationships. Nobody wants that, and it's around helping them start to make the changes that they can be accountable for.
and create happy memories together and go through that journey in life together.
I think if there was ever a way of justifying your involvement, Tom, 9 grandchildren would cover it.
Yeah.
The sheer fall of that is so daunting.
I'm one of 7, Chris, and I think at last count, my parents have, I can't remember if it's 18 or 19 grandchildren. Might be more than that now. I'm probably wrong.
I have 4 children. That's all I'm saying.
Same here.
That's all you need to say.
And don't forget the spouses, siblings, and their children, and yeah, all the big.
Well, again, that's another really good point around how do you want it to be in the future when, okay, if you weren't the person that in this example you said, Zoe, that had an affair and left, and even if whether they stayed with that person or not, you yourself, as the aggrieved party, will likely and hopefully for your own happiness meet someone at a later date. Well, how do you want that environment to be for then all those children? So I think most of you know this, and now other people will, but my ex-wife's boyfriend, it's a bit personal, but my ex-wife's boyfriend is actually my girlfriend's ex-husband.
Yeah,
So that's 4 adults, exactly. So you've got 4 adults that all have this huge emotional investment in this little melting pot of 4 children. So for us, it was imperative. In fact, we had to find a way to work together, and there was no other way, because you're going to have 2 sets of children that are then going to learn to play against each other as siblings, and then how they're going to take that further forward. So it's
that's crucial, Tom. Like, you've been there, and you can actually talk to these clients with real life experience. Is probably harder than theirs, fascinatingly.
Not always, sometimes.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris.
Excellent. No, that's fine. Right, we're probably coming up to the last round of questions. So hopefully we'll get as much covered as we can within the next 10-15 minutes or so. If we don't, there's going to be 2 options for anybody that's watching. As I say, the Q&A facility is available, so you can enter your questions in there. You're going to see a poll that comes up on your screen shortly. Now, that's an opportunity for you to simply tick against the presenter that you would like to contact you after the event. I think everyone's highlight the fact that they offer free consultation, so do take that up as a an opportunity if we haven't covered your question during the presentation. I've got one here that I think is probably joint between Manisha and Zoe, and the question is, I have a child with my ex-partner, but he refuses to pay child maintenance, now quoting lockdown as the reason. It's quite well off, so can definitely afford it. What can I do about this situation? So should we start with you, Manisha, on that one?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Chris. I mean, following on from what Tom was saying, if you haven't been able to have the how, what conversations, and it's all been why and blame game, then clearly things need to move on. So I'm sure you've already heard of it, but the Child Maintenance Service is the governing body, tasked to deal with child maintenance specifically. So if you haven't touched base with them and you haven't been on their website, do, because obviously that is your next point of call, or your next course of action, and have a look at their online calculator, because they do have one. And if you know what your ex's finances are roughly, you can put the figures into that online calculator and get a rough figure as to what they should be paying. And then go from there. If you can then have a conversation, then do, and say, well, look, I've actually looked it up. This is what roughly you should be paying. It is your obligation. It's not money for me. It's money, for our child. So why do you not want to do that? And if you still don't get anywhere, then obviously make the application to the Child Maintenance Service, and they will deal with it all for you. So they will make contact. They will get, all of the financials from your ex and carry out their detailed calculation, and then you can opt in to just let the Child Maintenance Service take that money directly and send it to you. There is a small fee for that, so if you can agree that it'll be a transfer from their account to your account, then there isn't a fee that the Child Maintenance Service will charge you for that. Another thing you might want to look at, if he is quite wealthy, there is an application you can make which is under the Children Act, and it's called Schedule 1, and that's how we refer to it often, a Schedule 1 application. And it's used in situations where, you know, one of the parents is quite well off or does have property, savings, etc. And you have the child or the children and you're not in the same sort of financial position. Now, the difference with that is all of those applications or the provisions under that application are for the benefit of the child or the children. So it's not for you, it's for the child. So for instance, you know, if you get a maximum assessment from the Child Maintenance Service, which means that, you know, your ex earns really well, and he's paying the top end of child maintenance through there, you can see if the court, the family court, can help you get a top up of the child maintenance, because, you know, they earn a lot, so why not? Also, if the child is in need of somewhere to live, for example, and obviously so do you, and your ex has properties or a spare property, then you might potentially get an order that you and the child can live in that property, but only until the child is 18, because remember, it is all for the benefit of the child, it's for the provision for the child. So the house will then revert back to your ex, but you know, your child is protected for all of that duration until they're an adult. So that it's quite niche, and it's something that you would need, you know, to take advice on. So if it's something you want to look into, do reach out, we'll have a chat about it. But there are options out there, and you need to be confident in obviously making moves and taking steps to protect you and protect your child in this situation. But yeah, Zoe, that might be something that you can add to in terms of financial planning for children.
Yeah, and this comes up a lot, and this is a lot of the work that Amrit and I do with clients who are already divorced and on the post, or even going through the divorce process and receiving maintenance. One, again, the emergency cash fund is key. So being able to have your own security to sort of at least top you up until you go through the process that you've just sort of spoken about, Manisha, sort of having, you know, again, basic expenditure covered for yourself and for the children, because we've seen it a lot this year. And, you know, where spouses are claiming they don't have enough money, maybe because they're furloughed, but you know they've got investments, cash, you know, they've got sufficient, and maybe even the furlough is still sufficient for it. And this does affect child maintenance and spousal maintenance. And spousal maintenance is one of those bugbears, isn't it? It's the first thing that they want to sort of, you know, stop or reduce or get rid of and try and find reasons for.
Yeah.
So definitely, you know, emergency cash fund is key for you and the kids. Think of a savings plans for the kids as well. Like, I think, especially with child maintenance, if it does a couple of months become a little bit excess, put it away, save it for the kids. For this reason, especially, where a lot of the things you think savings plan, you think junior ISA, actually for this, don't do a junior ISA, because then it's locked away till the child is 18. So do think about just a cash savings account, for example, for them. Junior ISAs are good, and do that separately, but that's for kind of their long term. That's for their maybe university fees, buying a house, buying a car, whatever they want to spend it on when they're 18. For this, just do a sort of cash savings plan. Maybe it's in your name, designated for them, that kind of thing, and then you can obviously access it and use it to help the kids should this happen to you. And thirdly, and most importantly, and Amrit and I do a lot of this and a lot of working through the process, is again, look at protection. So you can get, and when you're going through the divorce process, you should always talk to an advisor to get protection for spousal maintenance and child maintenance. And that is just in the form of an income protection policy based on the spouse's life. So you can get quotes and you can have a look at it to get protection that should anything happen to the spouse, you know, this is not just them not paying, this is them getting sick or disabled or having a critical illness, then the spousal maintenance or the child maintenance is protected. And it's a very quick and easy process for us to give you those quotes.
So when you say it's protected, so if there was a parent that stopped paying maintenance for 3 months, let's say during this pandemic, then the income protection kicks in and it pays out the same amount, or how does it operate?
So the income protection policy is slightly different in the sense that it will pay out when a sickness or disability has occurred in that spouse. So if the spouse, again, if they're off work sick, then the income protection payment will pay out to cover the child maintenance and cover the spousal maintenance. And we have to make sure as advisors it will cover the exact amount. So the client should receive it tax-free, exactly the amount that they would have received from the previous child maintenance or spousal maintenance.
Yeah, that's really helpful to bear in mind, actually.
Yeah, and you can just get quotes and you can just involve it. You know, when you're having these negotiations, when you're in the mediation process, even if they don't go with it, it's still something, like another thing in your arsenal to go forwards and say, well, you know, especially if you've got someone who's a bit erratic, or someone who has a mental health issue, or someone who loves sort of extreme outdoor sports, whatever it might be that makes one of the spouses a bit more nervous, getting this protection in place, or at least having it as part of the conversation and having quotes in that conversation, is really useful, and it helps them sort of know that there's another thing on their side.
So we've had a question come in on the Q&A, and it's going to be directed at Bruno on mortgages, but perhaps the family team want to add to that. And it's how can you remove an ex-partner from a mortgage as they no longer live in the property, so they're not living together, and the ex is refusing to contribute to their half of the mortgage, or willing to accept a buyout. So this sounds like there's some conversation already happened about, you know, buying that individual out, but it's just plainly refusing.
Okay, this may be more of a question possibly for on the legal side, because as long as the partner that's remaining in the property is able to continue paying the mortgage, because as mentioned before, all parties are technically jointly and severally liable. It's more of an issue when that remaining party is not able to meet that mortgage payment. That's when it becomes a problem. But I would say it's probably the way the question's put forward there, it sounds like the remaining party is able to afford the mortgage payments, and potentially maybe be able to afford the mortgage on their own, because there is technically, you need to take one party off the mortgage, and then that individual's income and circumstances have to be assessed for affordability to take on that mortgage loan on their own. Assuming that all stacks up, that's okay. But as the sort of the question's alluding to, I think it's more a case of if that partner is refusing to make mortgage payments or refusing to be bought out, I'm going to defer that question really to the Mackerel guys here to answer that question, because I think that's probably more of a legal thing than more financial, I suppose, on that basis. Yeah.
But if there was a default on the mortgage, because both names are still on that mortgage, it would affect both of their credit ratings. So it's not in anyone's interest for that to happen.
No, absolutely not. And yeah, if you have missed mortgage payments on your credit file, that is one of the worst things you can have on there, especially if you want to apply for another mortgage on your own, or if there is a separation and split, you need to go and apply for a mortgage. Yes, if you have defaults, missed mortgage payments, late payments, I mean, on a mortgage, that's not good at all. I mean, it's not good on any credit profile, so it's credit cards, car loans, personal loans, anything else like that. All of that can have a very detrimental effect on your credit rating. So yeah, I mean, we've had examples of people, cancelling direct debits as well at the start of the pandemic, for example. That's another touching on that point. Again, it's probably the worst thing you can do, because you've suddenly got no mortgage payments being made. There's defaults racking up, and you're not doing yourself any favours in that respect. But yeah, I'd say from the legal point of view, it'd be interesting to know from the Mackerel guys what the options are in that situation for clients, sort of away from the financing side of it.
I think that's probably me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, this is exactly the kind of situation that I was, talking about earlier on. I mean, there are lots of questions here which we can't obviously answer in this forum. But the fundamental here is that I think if I were in the shoes of the person wanting to buy out, I would act quickly. I think that's the thing. Because what can happen, possibly not so much now, but I think some people look at a former property as almost like an investment. So I'm moving off, they can pay for it. I'm paying for my rent, so whatever on that one. I can't afford both. 10 years later, oh, by the way, can I have my share of the house, please? And at that point, 10 years on, it may be completely impossible to buy the person out. So I think before things get complicated, and before you get into, oh yeah, but I built an extension and I know it's our jointly owned house, and I didn't ask you, but I just got on with it. Or my girlfriend moved in and she paid the rent for 6 months, and now she wants a slice of the pie too. Act quickly, because the value, you can establish the value, you can establish what the mortgage balance was. You can avoid some of the arguments about, well, I paid this and you've done that, and equitable accounting and what have you. if I were in the shoes of the person asking this question, I would say, can I have a chat with you, Jim, and can I have a chat with you, Bruno, about refinancing? Because you know, we need to kind of crack on with this. And I suppose, you know, do it sooner rather than later, and then you're paying less fundamentally. It's as simple as that. So that's how I'd look at it.
I mean, in lots of ways, it's easier to force a sale in those circumstances if the parties are not married. There's legislation where you can do that. If the relationship is broken down, they're not married, then you can use the Trust of Land Act to force a sale. It's much harder if you're married, actually, because the marital legislation doesn't provide for a forced sale during the course of the proceedings. So you've got to wait until you get to the end of the proceedings before you can do anything.
Yeah, and
I would say that in that,
sorry,
in
Jim.
my answer to that question, I assumed that they were unmarried because they used the word partner.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
obviously, I could be wrong on that, but that was the assumption I made.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that obviously, as a basic explanation, you can't just unilaterally remove, you know, your partner from the mortgage. There is a process, as Bruno said. The lender has to assess whether, you know, if there is agreement to do that, that you can take on the mortgage yourself solely. So it's not an easy answer, I'm afraid, but something that can be explored.
Oh, yeah, so everyone's circumstances, as I said before, are unique. So it's always good to speak to an independent advisor on all fronts as well. And that applies to Zoe as well from a wealth management perspective, and Tom as well. You know, if there's an emotional element to obviously to what's going on in the whole situation, it's good to speak to ourselves as a collective team ultimately.
Yeah.
To help guide you through the process basically, and give you the right advice as to what the best options are.
Excellent. Okay, guys, I'm glad we're recording this because there is a lot of information there that we've covered during a very short period of time. So we'll end it there on the questions because we're coming up to time. But before we close the session, I just wanted to do a final run round to see if anyone had any closing remarks or sort of final takeaways for the audience. Can we start with you, Bruno?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem, Chris. I think really, as I mentioned before, there's no such thing as a silly question when it comes to mortgage financing, especially in the current climate. So it's good to be in an informed position, know what your options are, especially if your circumstances have changed, for the better or for worse. Yeah, I would say come and speak to us. We offer a complimentary, no obligation advice service, and we're very happy to speak to you. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Family team as a collective.
Well, I would say come and have a chat. As I say, we do an independent free consultation. So pick up the phone, email us, have a chat. That is the best advice that you can anybody, you know, whatever the field, whether it's Zoe or Tom or Bruno or anyone, just pick up the phone and have a chat.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I can certainly, obviously I'm a bit biased, I work there, but I think anyone that I've spoken to, probably the most daunting thing is that it's picking the phone up, it's that disclosure or admittance that you need help. But once you get over that, then the sense of relief, and that's the feedback I've had from you know, people that I've asked, look, just give them a call. It's entirely confidential and doesn't cost anything, which surprises people. I think the fact that it's free. Well, yeah, because we don't know whether it was actually we're the right people. Do you need a solicitor? Do you need a financial advisor? You know, quite possibly, but until you have that initial chat, you just won't know.
Or sometimes just drop an email, because for a lot of people it's a very emotional time and talking about it can make it really tricky. So email us, WhatsApp us, whatever you want to do, whatever is easy for you, and you know, we'll come back to you and do what we can for you.
Right. Okay. Zoe.
And I think you're not going to be judged is a big thing. People, especially in our world, Amber, isn't it? They think, I don't want to go to an advisor. I've managed to get myself into debt and I don't want to come with this black picture. But actually, we're problem solvers and we'll always see the light. And I think when you sort of picked up on it earlier, Tom, I think what we do always is reframing. Like, okay, actually, let's flip that round. What's the way out? But I just wanted to leave everyone with a couple of statistics that I think are quite scary in a way, and quite interesting in the sense of how many people do need to come to people for advice, you know, whether that's an initial consultation, go away with guidance, or actually follow on with advice afterwards. But 46% of people in the UK are worried that they will not have enough money to live without their spouse post-divorce. And 47% of the UK are worried that their spouse will take everything in a divorce proceeding. So that causes a lot of hindrance for people who really need to take this leap and sadly need to take this leap, that they don't want to take the next step because they're financially, there's this huge barrier, whether it's emotional or financial. So I think that step is crucial. Financial education is absolutely the key to financial independence and financial security, whether that's the male or the female. Really understand your situation. What Amrit and I and what all financial planners do initially is very visual. It's cash flow planning. So we input everything, where are you at now? Assets, income, expenditure, debts. What does it look like now? And project it forwards. Like Tom was saying, let's look much longer, maybe not to all grandkids, but we'll go to, what about 10 years time, 20 years time? What about your retirement? Seems something you're never going to think about in your divorce proceedings, but you do need to think about your retirement and even long-term care potential in the future, and kids, when kids want to get married or when they want to get on the property ladder, who's going to help them? So that cash flow exercise not only helps understand what settlement you need to go for and what's a reasonable settlement, and helps both parties understand how to sort of get through that minefield, but also sets you up for sort of the light at the end of the tunnel, that there is something afterwards, and this is my money now, and it's my plan, and it's what I want to do. And definitely one quick nugget that a financial planner should never not say on a panel like this is, don't forget about the pension. Whether you're the male or the female, don't forget about the pension. It could be worth more than the house. So one legal party might be really looking into it, one legal party might be hiding the fact that this is a very good pension that one side has got. So start that conversation and get educated on your own pensions and what the other side is and how you can equalize that. But yeah, definitely get advice. As I say, financial education absolutely is the key to financial independence and security.
Brilliant. Tom?
Yeah, two kind of closing points from me is, I suppose, a bit of a tip and a takeaway for people to think about. Is building the right support around you, building a team of support around you. Think about it like an athlete. They have a physio, they have a dietitian, they have physical education, etc. They have all these people that make them the best version of themselves. And when you're going through a divorce or separation, whether it's purely around assets, whether it's around children, and all of the situations that have led to where you are, it's about building the right team and the positive influences around you. And in actual fact, having all of the legal aspect covered, the finances, the mortgage, but also the mindset, and all of that collectively putting you in the right place to move you forward more congruently and quicker as well, and with a more successful outcome that you want to work towards. So it's not just around picking one or the other. In fact, actually all of us work together to be able to help you get where you want and need to be. My final point is actually for people, particularly when it's children, when they have child matters involved as well. And this is again for whether it's legal, whether it's finance, whether it's emotional, etc., and all of it as collectively as a team again is, I know that you guys get this as well, but I always have someone says around that, well, who gets to win and who gets to lose in a divorce? And I always see comments around solicitors or people, or even people like myself and Bruno and Zoe, that we win because we're helping these people, and obviously that we do come at a cost. But actually, the only winners or losers out of any divorce separation when there's children involved are your children, and they either win or lose, not both. So it's down to you as the parents to decide if you can build the right team around both of you, working collaboratively, and going back to communication. It's your children that get to win or get to lose, but you get to decide that by the actions that you take.
Yeah, it's something you're in control of, as you say, Tom.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you to our panelists for all your expert advice. I'm glad that this was recorded because so much information has been shared, for all of our attendees, for you to be able to play back in your own time. It will be available online. Feel free to share the link if you think any friends or any colleagues may find this webinar useful as well. It will be available to watch for all. So thank you all for attending. We really hope you've enjoyed our webinar today, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.